started so we can get as many questions as we want in. But thank you all for being here in the career panel webinar called Designing Your Future Chartering Career in Ecological Engineering, hosted by the American Ecological Engineering Society. And so my name is Emily Byers. I'm a postdoc with the Kentucky Water Research Institute, and I'm also the chair of the AEES Early Career Committee. And so I'll be moderating the panel today, and also with me we have Megan Kramer, who is the student rep of AES and also chair of the AES Student Committee. And so before we get started, I'd just like to acknowledge the different contributors that have helped plan this webinar. And so we have Tess Nuva, Farnaz, and Sam Francis Sage with the Communications Committee. We have Joey Smith representing the Community Initiatives Committee, and also Mackenzie Dorman with the Early Career Committee as well. And so today we have 4 early career panelists who have each taken kind of a different path pursuing an ecological engineering profession. And so with us, we have Rachelle Crow, is a natural resource engineer with the Ohio Department of Agriculture. Claudia McAllister-Peterson is a senior engineer with Crawford, Murphy, and Tilley. We have Dr. Kelsey McDonough, who is with Flood ID Product Lead and is with the Water Institute. And then also Dr. John McMaine is an associate extension professor in Biosystems Agriculture Engineering Department at the University of Kentucky. And so how this session will work is I'll ask the panelists a few questions to get us started, and then we'll open the floor to questions from those of you in the audience today. So either feel free to submit them with the Q&A button, and then Megan will help moderate those questions, or also feel free to unmute yourself and you can introduce yourself and ask your question out loud. But I guess to get us started, panelists, could you first each tell me about your academic background and the path that you took to get into the current position you're in? And we'll go ahead and start with Rachelle.
Can you repeat the question? I'm already buffering.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yeah, maybe if you can turn off your camera if you're not talking, that might help the bandwidth a little bit. But I guess just to get us started, tell us about your academic background and then how you got into your career, the path you took to the position you're in now.
Sure. So I'm Rachelle Crow. I started my academic career at Michigan State University. I graduated there in 2020 with a degree in biosystems engineering and a couple minors in environmental sustainability. And then I went straight to Ohio State where I did some research with Dr. J. Martin in their biosystems and food agriculture biological engineering department. And we focused on edge of field practices to mitigate phosphorus runoff in Northwest Ohio. I only got a master's out of that. I bailed out. I didn't want to go all the way through a PhD. And so in 2022, I worked a couple of years at a consulting firm working in sanitary sewers and working on sanitary sewers and designing, and I did get in them. And then I came back to Ohio, where I'm from, and I'm working now for ODA, the Ohio Department of Agriculture, the Division of Soil and Water Conservation. I'm one of 5 engineers in the department. We work on helping farmers improve water quality coming off of their lands, specifically if their water is making it into the waters of the state. So I work closely with the federal government and the county governments and everything like that. So that's what I do.
Thank you. Claudia, would you want to go next?
Sure. So my name's Claudia. I had gotten my bachelor's at Ohio State University in ecological engineering. The way I found myself in my current position was I really enjoyed the hydraulics and hydrology aspect of my courses, and I had applied to positions I was looking for ecological engineering originally, but I brought in due to kind of a narrow job opportunities to start applying as an ecologist at engineering firms. So I had gotten an interview as a wetland ecologist at an engineering firm. And in my first interview, I said, hey, listen, I don't want to just do ecology. I would also like to do engineering. And so in my second interview, they brought a civil engineer. And so at my company, I'm the first ecological engineer. And I have a dual position where I work in both roles. So I do both wetland delineations, NEPA permitting on the natural resources side. And then I also do hydraulics design for the civil engineering side. And I got my PE about a year and a half ago. Trying to think if there was something else I really wanted to highlight there, but that's all I can think of at the moment. So that was a little unusual. They didn't know what ecological engineering was in my interview, but they trusted me, believed in me, and here we are. And I will say that probably that would qualify a lot more as a conventional route of engineering, the route I went. So at my firm, it's a 80-year-old firm. They started their environmental department in 2019 because previously they were doing that work out of house. So they would contract another consulting firm to do the environmental work. And so they started their natural resources group in 2019. And they were like, well, that sounds great, having an engineer that also knows something about ecology. So that was my ticket in, and I've really liked my company so far. And they've been pretty open-minded about things, but because the history of our work is a lot of gray infrastructure, that's where a lot of our bread and butter comes from. So just giving that context of, I am an ecological engineer, but I have definitely had a lot of training in the more conventional routes to try to strengthen the foundations of my career. And now I'm more after chasing work within the consulting fields that aligns more with ecological engineering.
Thank you. Kelsey, would you want to introduce yourself next?
Yeah, sure. Okay. I'm Kelsey McDonough. I went to North Carolina State for undergrad and got my degree in biological engineering. And then I did an NSF RU program at Kansas State before the senior year of undergrad and ended up going to Kansas State for both my master's and PhD with Dr. Stacy Hutchinson. And I focused on the intersection of flooding and ecosystem services and how we can mitigate flooding by increasing the provision of different ecosystem services. And then from there, I sort of followed the traditional academic track. I did a postdoc in Germany in an ecosystem services like specific group, and then I ended up doing a second postdoc in Australia with the Fulbright program, doing more work on flooding and ecosystem services. And then when I moved back to the United States, I transitioned into the tech sector. So the last 3 companies I've worked with have been in the climate tech sector, and specifically on flood intelligence and trying to create technology that can tell us where a flood is going to occur. So a little bit different from, the planning side of things and trying to understand the intersections of the environment and flooding and human interactions and behavior. And now I'm working very acutely around flood events and trying to create models and technology that can tell us where it's going to flood and how much it's going to flood so that we can make decisions ahead of a flood event, during a flood event, and after a flood event that can help to save lives, to mitigate losses. And so we work across industries from, government and working with emergency management to people in insurance to retail, logistics, oil and gas, everything, across the board because everyone's impacted by floods. So it's definitely been a non-linear career path for me, but it's been very rewarding and never thought when I was in school that this is what I would be doing today. I didn't even know it was possible, to be honest with you. But it's been a really cool and rewarding career path in getting to kind of push forward technology and still working with research on a day-to-day basis, but in a little bit of a different application.
Thank you. And John, could you please introduce your path?
Yes. Well, my name is John McMaine, and now I'm a associate extension professor at University of Kentucky in biosystems and agricultural engineering. This is actually where I did my undergrad and master's, so I feel fortunate I got to come back home for that. Finished those a long time ago, and then went to Oklahoma State and for my PhD and worked with the extension specialist for stormwater in the state, Dr. Jason Vogel, and he's now at the University of Oklahoma, and did a lot of ecological engineering type work, so constructed wetlands, managing runoff, reducing pesticides. We developed a optimization tool for green infrastructure to help municipalities kind of screen different options for green infrastructure. And then one kind of unique part of my PhD program was because my advisor was an extension specialist, I also got to do a lot of extension. And so what that meant was working directly with stakeholders and stakeholder groups. So in my case, it was the nursery industry, so plant nurseries. And we did workshops for rain gardens and constructed wetlands. And then that really made me competitive for the position I got after my PhD, which was a extension heavy faculty at South Dakota State University in their agricultural and biosystems engineering program. And I was there for 7 years, held a few different roles, mainly extension and research, also a little bit of administrative. And then due to some personal reasons, my parents are getting older and it seemed like a good idea to try to get closer to them. I looked for opportunities to come back to Kentucky, and so moved back about a year ago and back home in biosystems and ag engineering.
Thank you. And so one question we got is each of you have different career paths and some of you are licensed. We're just wondering, within each of your different professions, what do you see as a benefit of pursuing licensing, such as the professional engineering license, or maybe other licensings or certifications, maybe the CED with AEES? And whoever wants to start can lead that off.
I could start with talking about the PE license some. So with civil engineering, the ability to stamp your own plans and designs is a huge advantage within the field. That's not as true for a lot of other engineering disciplines like mechanical or chemical, but PE licensure, if you're doing civil infrastructure, is pretty critical for your career mobility and marketability. It's kind of hard to overstate that for civil engineering. You qualify for a lot more positions, you earn a lot of credibility with your clients, and you're also able to work independently if you are able to stamp your own plans. If you're bringing an ecological engineering project to life, the odds are someone with a PE needs to sign off on it. So there's a great benefit to having a PE in that circumstance. And I am hoping to be able to get the CED licensure once I'm able to get my portfolio built up more.
I'll just echo what Claudia said. I got my PE at the beginning of the year, and I think it's critical to get it if you're anywhere touching civil engineering. I had a couple friends who work for the NRCS. If you guys aren't familiar, that's the USDA. It's a federal division of the USDA, and they were like, oh, we don't need to get our PEs. We don't need them here at the USDA. And after a couple months of what's been happening in the past year, they're like, well, maybe it would help from marketability. And they're looking into it. I think that even if you don't see yourself needing it, you may as well just hunker down and take a couple of exams and get it. It might help you in the future. It won't hurt you.
I'll add to that. I think it definitely can't hurt you. Where I am in my career in the tech sector, there's not a lot of regulation in in that traditional sense. Like we don't require PEs because what we're doing is a little bit different from, a traditional engineering role. But to Rachelle's point, like, if you want to transition roles from one type of job to another. Like if I ever wanted to go into consulting, for example, having a PE is absolutely necessary. I don't currently have it, and I probably won't get it at this point since I'm kind of on a business management track and moving a little bit out of engineering at this point in my career. But It's something that if you have the opportunity and you qualify to sit for the PE exam, I would definitely take it because it's just one of those things that can't hurt you. In my field, we see more people getting things like their PMPs and other project management type of certifications that people do, which again, they're not required in any means, but they do help you stand out on different job
About these
applications
heists,
and things like that.
we Ocean's 11 or The Sopranos?
Yeah, I don't need to add a lot, but the only point I'll make is we get questions about is it useful in academia? And I think to Kelsey's point, it's not critical. I think the more critical thing is getting tenure. And so I didn't sit for my PE while I was at South Dakota State because honestly, I mean, you expend mental capital to study and prepare for the PE. And so I expended that mental capital doing things that would advance my case for tenure. Having said that, now that I am tenured, I do plan to sit for the PE next year. And yeah, the benefit to academics is that kind of the credibility piece. I mean, if I'm going to work with consultants and if I'm going to work with municipalities, what's my word worth if I'm not a PE? But even if I'm not stamping the designs, it helps them understand that, yeah, this guy is serious and brings some credibility to even conversations with those individuals.
Thank you. And then this was a question we actually got submitted online with the RSVP link. But for Kelsey, they were wanting to know if you could talk more about getting a Fulbright position and how did you go about doing that? Who did you have to reach out to and just more logistics on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a great program. Definitely encourage people to do it. I know so many people that have done a Fulbright, and it's just such a good way to see the world and see a different perspective of the world, both professionally and personally. As I was finishing up my PhD, I applied for the Fulbright Scholar Program for a postdoc position. The thing to know about the Fulbright application process is it takes forever. It's like a year and a half long position or process once you start it to like fully awarding and getting there. So I did a whole postdoc in between the time I actually started the application process and ended up going on the Fulbright, right? So it's very, very long. And I applied to Australia, which is one of the more competitive ones. The English-speaking countries are the most competitive for obvious reasons. But you can, pick anywhere in the world. And what I did was for postdocs, you have to write a research proposal, a competitive proposal, like you would for any sort of funding. So I reached out so you can look on the Fulbright website, you can see what universities are willing to sponsor. And then I just started searching professors in the civil engineering because biological engineering really is a US specific thing. So I looked for civil engineering departments and people that I was interested in and in working with. And I set up meetings with them, just reached out to them via email. Really liked one of them. And so we ended up putting in a proposal together to study basically flood behavior and developing an ecosystem services index based on waterbird breeding behavior in the Macquarie Marshes in the outback of Australia from the Millennium Drought, which was really cool. Learned a lot about birds in this process. But we ended up getting awarded, and then 8 months later, I moved to Australia. So it was like very, very long process. But I definitely would encourage you to do it. It requires a lot of prep. Like you need recommendation letters and this research proposal and a lot of different steps, but it pays decently well for an early stage academic position. And you get, housing, living, travel, a research stipend, and it's a really cool club once you come back and become an alumni. There's all sorts of people doing really cool things. Every major city has a Fulbright chapter, and you can go meet other people that you know. So it's a really nice professional network, and I would definitely recommend it. But definitely plan ahead, and they have webinars and things that can help you through the application process.
Thank you. And this was getting to our last question we had submitted beforehand. It's more of a general to each of you panelists, but don't feel like you each have to answer it if you don't have something else to contribute. So as a graduate student preparing to enter the competitive job market, what do you wish you had learned earlier through your education or early career experiences, which relate to ecological engineering? And what key technical and soft skills do you think are most valuable to develop early on?
I could share. Um, so as an undergraduate, I had taken a internship with a federal agency, and I had a decent amount of experience with working under those agencies. And then I had worked really closely with Dr. Andy Ward in a more academic employment. And I do wish that while I was, before I take a full-time job, understood a little bit more of the private industry world, just because so much of what actually gets built has to cross through that, even if the funders are through agencies and public entities. But I also, time is finite, and I feel like I got a lot of valuable experience through my other stuff, but it would have been nice to fill out that roundhouse and be able to get some private industry experience before I jumped into the employment pool.
I can go ahead and talk about maybe like some low-hanging fruit. I think the soft skill that we don't learn maybe as well in undergraduate studies for engineering is like communication. Um, and so I just think that that's something that I had to flex my muscles and learn a little bit more about and get more comfortable with when I entered like even graduate school. And the workforce is just to be comfortable with how to communicate like kind of heady topics. Um, Part of my job is teaching people who work for local municipalities, and I didn't get into engineering to teach people. It's not my strongest suit, but just diving into opportunities to kind of explain and so maybe like taking a TA position or something like that to just learn how to communicate science and math. But like Claudia said, time is finite. You can only do so much, so no pressure at all.
I can go. I think the one thing that I wish I had learned a lot more in undergrad was stronger coding skills. Even through graduate school, like a lot of that was self-taught, and it's been something, especially being in tech, like it's part of my everyday life. I don't necessarily have to code, but understanding what other people are doing and trying to give feedback to that. So much of engineering now is really code heavy. And so I think um, when I went through undergrad, it was like a little bit before that was becoming so prominent. And I wish I had, taken some electives and things like that to bolster those skills. And in terms of soft skills, I think the number one thing I always tell people is you can never network enough. Like networking is so key to your career success um, in both academia and consulting and where I am. Like, I think you never know who you're going to end up partnering with on a project or on a proposal, or who's going to be the next person that's hiring you for your next role. And so, really just not being afraid to talk to people, connect to people, and maintain those relationships as you go through your career. You just never know where your career path is going to take you. So definitely get comfortable like talking to people, communicating. Those soft skills are so important, and they don't teach you that necessarily.
I would agree. I don't really have anything to add to those, but I would say communication and networking are key. Um, a little bit more on the kind of, and Rachelle mentioned like you don't necessarily get into engineering because you want to talk to people, but the reality is that if you're an engineer, you're taking a problem and you're developing a solution for that problem, but that's not the end of the story because that solution then has to get implemented. And that last piece, right? Like we talk about the last mile and logistics, that last piece from developing the solution to getting it implemented, that's really a communication piece. And part of that could be communicating to the client that, it's the best solution and your solution is the best. Part of it could be communicating to the contractor that, even if it's something maybe that they're unfamiliar with, that you kind of got to work through that process of helping them understand possibly the why, but for sure the what and the how. Otherwise, a stream restoration project goes in that some key features were missed and the whole thing blows out. And that's a communication piece. So yeah, I would definitely say communication. And one additional piece to Kelsey's networking piece, like, I mean, Kelsey and I have known each other since probably 2013 or something. And you kind of have a chance meeting, and then like these are your colleagues, right? So get to know the people in your graduate cohort. I think what Emily and others are doing with AES, like really lean into committees because it's more than just a superficial relationship. Lean into opportunities to build real relationships because, yeah, it's those relationships that not only are going to kind of help you progress in your career, but honestly, that's a lot of what brings enjoyment to your career, right? Like seeing these people that you've seen for the last 10 years and you're so excited to see them again because they're good people, they're doing good stuff. And yeah, but if you haven't taken the time to really develop that relationship or lean into opportunities that allow for that, then you're missing out. So yeah, nothing different, but I would reemphasize those two pieces, relationships and communication.
Thank you. That looks like we have a question from the audience, Terry Hazen. They asked, did any of you take a graduate course, such as careers in academia or a national lab or industry? And maybe Terry, you could unmute yourself if you want to elaborate on that. But
Oh, I'm Terry Hazen. I'm a governor's chair at the University of Tennessee in Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And I'm also retired from the Savannah Riverside and from University of Puerto Rico and from Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. And I have been doing this since before all of you were born. So I teach this careers class. And I've done this at various institutions where I've been at. And the students always find that it's really helpful to get this perspective on what would be required both in academia and industry and in the national labs. And there's a very difference in terms of how you would operate in those systems and what you need to produce to advance and that sort of thing. So I tried to go through all that and try to give them opportunities to see what the options are. And it's funny, a lot of them change their minds after they start the course and decide that, oh, maybe I want to go into academia, or quite often they say, maybe I want to go into industry. Because there are benefits in terms of things like salary and advancement, but it doesn't have the tenure capabilities that academia may have and that sort of thing. So anyway, I just want to know how many of you have had that type of course and if it helped you. My students quite often come back to me afterwards and say, oh, wow, that course was the best course I ever had because it actually focused me on what I needed to do. And I actually go through things like how do you apply for jobs and what, exactly how your CVs and that sort of thing should be. So anyway, it's just an old farts performance here. And I'm at Oak Ridge National Laboratory right now. I have various appointments, both here and at University of Tennessee and labs. And I've had about, let's see, 60 or 70 graduate students and 28 postdocs. And I currently have 4 graduate students and 4 technicians. So I've been around for a while. Let me put it like that. So, have any of you had a careers course like that? So you all seem to be successful, let me say that, and you've learned what you need to learn for what you say you're doing right now. So um, maybe it's a moot point, but
Yeah, I did not, and I ended up all right, but I definitely was trying to fill that out when you said, oh, you cover industry, you cover academia and all that. And I had said, as what I wish I had learned as an undergraduate was I wish I had hit all 3 rounds so that I could actually have that knowledge going into the employment pool for full time. So, nope, but I do wish I had that.
Yeah, I didn't have a class like that either in grad school. We had one of the very first classes we had to take in biological engineering at Michigan State in undergrad was like, what do you do with this degree? Because like a lot of people don't know what that means. But
yeah.
that was really broad, right? That was like, you can go into food, you can go into biopharmaceuticals. But as you narrowed down, it was more difficult to understand exactly what we're supposed to be doing with the knowledge that we're gaining. So I think a class like that would be so helpful,
Yeah.
instead of just kind of like trial and erroring it and um, like I did for a while.
Yeah, I mean the closest we got was seminar class in but very broad strokes. Yeah, some of the career preparation, yes, and CVs and interviews, but not in depth. One thing I did do, which I was very thankful and fortunate to be able to get to do, was a future faculty workshop that was put on by Purdue University, and that was helpful because um, I don't know. As a graduate student, you look at a faculty and, well, number one, you're wondering why you can never get a hold of your advisor, like why they never get you feedback. And then you become a faculty and you never respond and never get feedback to your students and you feel bad, but like now you get it. But that helps for like for a lot of the, even budgets for grants and all this really, I don't know, all the little details, which are in every industry. But so that was helpful, but only limited to academia.
Yeah, I never ever had the opportunity to take anything like that. I did ask a lot of questions towards the end of my PhD when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go, but um, I often felt like I was getting a lot of one-sided pro-academia advice. And so, I mean, that's the result of the environment you're in, right? So, and I did really think that that was going to be the pathway that I would go for a long time. And who knows, maybe it still will be one day, but um, I would have loved to have a course like that, but
Joey just reminded me we did have an undergraduate course called Professional Development, which I was in it with him, and thank you for reminding me, Joey.
So the one thing that also um, would help is it because the problem is that your faculty advisor like to think that they can provide you all the information that you need. Well, that's not necessarily true, okay? Because in my case, I have been a manager at various national labs and in industry and in academia. And I also usually co-teach this with another faculty member too. And I've been, matter of fact, when I was at the University of Puerto Rico, they were trying to make me dean. That's why I left, okay? Because I didn't want to be a dean, okay? So it's just something that, um, if you're in academia, you might want to impress upon your department that they may want to see if they can develop a class like this. And it could be broad. So we do it at the University of Tennessee across all departments. So I have students take that from mathematics, physics, and engineering and whatever. Okay, so
Yeah, thank you, Terry, for that
yep.
insight.
Hi.
We have another question from the audience. Where did you learn about ecology? Did you take classes in school or learn independently on the job? And why did you join AES? So two-parter.
I did learn ecology in my undergraduate courses, so wetland ecology classes, and that was a very good prep for me to learn a lot more on the job. So I don't think I would have gotten in the door at the consulting firm I'm at for the ecology position if I didn't have that training, some familiarity with the Army Corps of Engineers wetland delineations. And there is an organization, I think it's called Ohio Wetlands Society or something. I did go to a lot of their workshops when I was a senior in my undergraduate, so that was really beneficial. And I did put that on some of my resumes that I had done this, even though it's not like a certification, it's not a pass fail or anything. It was just I was spending some weekends going and doing these additional things that I thought would round out some wetland exposure for me in ecology.
I first learned of ecology in high school, and it's kind of how it got me interested. And I took a couple of like classes in biology and that kind of thing for my undergrad. Didn't actually take any ecology courses until I got to grad school. Um, and I don't think that I'm a member of AEES. I think that I just have professional connections that are. So I'm happy to be here and talk with you all today.
My first like formal ecology class was definitely in grad school. I took a freshwater ecology class, which was really interesting, but um, I don't do very much ecology anymore. I did a lot when I was doing my ecosystem services research, especially in Germany, where you're doing some really cool work in the Danube River Basin. But um, these days, I really don't do too much of it. And I also am not a member of AEES currently. I was at one time back in grad school when I was really working on research in this field, but that has lapsed, as have a lot of my professional memberships. So, but know, like Rachelle, know a few people that are still members. So
Yeah, I've never taken an ecology class, and it's a regret. But I am a member of AES, so and yeah, ironies. Um, yeah, it just never worked out. Like anytime it was offered, there was a conflict with something else that I had to take, and we had to sacrifice it. But I remember a conversation with my advisor that he's like, "You're going to graduate as a ecological engineer, more or less." I mean, it was in biosystems and ag engineering, but without having taken an ecology class, and we didn't know how we felt about that. But um, that's why you that's why you work in teams too, because my expertise is very limited, and however broad I think it is, it's very limited. Similar to Terry's comment about however much an academic thinks they can talk about industry and government, well, we really can't without with any authority because we don't have the experience. But to answer the second part, why did you join AES? It goes back to the networking and communication piece. Number one, opportunities to, it's usually easier to talk to people that you have something in common with. And so it gives you the confidence and being comfortable meeting people that you don't know, because usually you can start a pretty interesting conversation about something that you're interested with, right? And then the second piece is, yeah, it's networks. I mean, I wouldn't say every opportunity that I've gotten myself into, but some of them definitely have come because of going to conferences and presenting at conferences. So yeah, it's an ability and an opportunity to lean into a network of people that has similar interests, and it really could lead you into directions that you didn't otherwise expect.
And we have a question from Alexander. So if someone is looking to start an AES student chapter at the university, do you have any advice? So maybe hit at, have you guys participated in student chapters or other types of student chapters, if not AES, and how did that impact your career too?
I was not a part of any student chapters or groups, and maybe I would have got more job offers if I had, who knows, but ended up all right with that. But I think it would be very beneficial if you are passionate and interested. It wasn't on my radar. I was doing the Ohio wetland workshops and things like that. That seems like it would have been really much in line if I was also a part of that student chapter. So just wasn't on my radar at the time.
My only
I
advice, sorry,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead, Kelsey.
No, you go. That's fine.
Okay. I was gonna say my only advice would be to find a faculty member at your university that could be a champion. I mean, you're gonna have to be the champion, but any undergraduate student organization is going to need a faculty advisor, and so I think that's the first step. Preferably one that's affiliated with AEES, because then they can connect with the broader network. One benefit of that is it gives you an excuse to email, like to get on people's radars. To Claudia's point of, maybe would have more job offers. Well, if you're a member of a student branch of a AES and you now have the freedom to email these people because you've got a reason rather than just a random person, a random student, which is also okay. But you can be like, hey, we want to invite you to talk at our meeting, and then now they know you, right? So.
Yeah, to answer Emily's earlier point about like broader involvement in other student chapters, I never had an AES student chapter at either of the universities that I went to, but I was involved in like every single other student chapter that was probably provided to me, and a lot of them made a really big difference in my career, especially as I got later on in my career. I joined the Ecosystem Services Partnership, and they have a young ecosystem services group, and I ended up like co-writing several peer-reviewed papers that were published with people from that group, and got to know a lot of people that were all over the world, and we worked together on, different research. And I think that was really instrumental, like in my early career, in building some of those networking connections, because they were people I would have never met otherwise, and in very different like specializations to my own, people that were doing more like human sociological, environmental related research, things that really rounded us out as a very diverse group working on similar problems. So definitely would recommend it, even if it's not an AES student chapter, to get involved in like whatever you can, because it gets back to that networking piece.
I don't have really anything to add, but when I came to college, I was like not comfortable with just like talking to people. That's the first step. And so just like getting into clubs gets you started with that. And I need a reason to talk to people. So, like John said, sending an email and saying, hey, I have this position and I was wondering if you could come speak with us. It's a perfect way to get your foot in the door. It's just more excuses to practice those soft skills that we're going to need like in life. So, yeah. I love that idea. Whoever wants to start an AES chapter, yeah, find a professor and get started. That's great.
Yeah, we only have a couple official AES student chapters, so the more the merrier. But keep the questions coming. In the meantime, I'll ask one of my own. So this is kind of a two-parter, but what do you find most satisfying or fulfilling about your job? And then on the flip side, what's the most challenging, and are you supported in those challenges?
Um, I think that's a really easy question for me. I love my job because I work directly with farmers who don't think about our natural resources. They think about how it could, it definitely impacts the growth and their bottom line, which is great. But they're not thinking about it in um, when we're talking about our air quality or our water quality or our soil health and erosion here in Ohio. And so I just really love the opportunity in 2025 to like communicate and bring ideas to the forefront of someone else's mind and work and see how we can address their main issues as well as addressing issues from, the taxpayer of Ohio's perspective. Yeah, sometimes the solutions aren't like 100% awesome for the environment, but it's all about compromise and finding a better solution to the problem at hand than what you're currently working with. So I love my job that we're talking to different people who might not be talking about these topics otherwise. That being said, the most challenging part of my job, I used to work in consulting. I was surrounded by engineers. It was great. We spoke the same language. In this job, I'm like one of 5 in the state who work for the department and, well, the division. And I work with agronomists and nutrient management specialists and communicators. And it's fantastic because we're addressing the problem together. But of course, we speak different languages. So it's all about communicating clearly, and it all comes back to that. Making sure that we're all on the same page and working toward the same goal, and respecting what everyone is bringing to the table because we're all experts in something. I always go to our grazers. I'm like, I don't know anything about plants, and people are asking me about plants. So there's always a niche that everyone can fill. So working together and coming to a solution, it can be challenging, but also exciting. So that's what I got.
For me, in the beginning of my job, so 6.5 years ago, my most fulfilling part of it was the diversity of things that I got to do. So especially being in the dual position of natural resources and engineering, that was really fulfilling for me. And the biggest challenge was the technical learning curve of both of those professions. Now, 6.5 years later, the most fulfilling part of my job is my technical competence and design capabilities for hydraulic engineering. And I really, really enjoy that and find a lot of satisfaction in that work. And my most challenging part now is trying to win more of the type of work that I want to be working on and less of the gray infrastructure solutions. In the question of, do you have the support you need to overcome the challenges? I think it's complicated because I'm given really immense support from both my natural resources boss and my engineering boss. But the downside of trailblazing is I don't have a mentor. I don't have someone to look to that is unconventional to them because both of these people are extraordinarily supportive, but they are in conventional roles. And I'm kind of this unknown. And so I do wish that I had more of an ecological engineering mentor, which, maybe that would be a huge benefit within these networks and these chapters and this networking that maybe you find someone that you can look up to that has more experience than you. Because I am very supported in this trailblazing role, but it is a little lonely and a little bit like I'm trying to figure out how to win the work and make it work with our group. So, yeah.
I would also say that people is the most satisfying and fulfilling part of my role, and maybe 3 different groups of people. One is working with students, and it's so fulfilling to see students that you've gotten to work with like do great things. Like that's just the best feeling. And to it's them, right? It's them putting the hard work in, but just to have a small role in kind of guiding that work is really fulfilling. The second group that's really fulfilling is, like Rachelle mentioned, stakeholders, farmers. It could be municipalities, homeowners, but to go to them in their kind of time of need, if you will, and to be able, again, like it's the first 90% of the conversation is me listening, because if I come in with a predetermined solution, that's not very helpful. But listen and then again offer what I can to support them. And then the third piece I would say is, so if the first group was students that I work directly with, the third would be kind of this type of setting. For whatever reason, I've gotten to, I wouldn't say mentor, but maybe help people kind of in their academic search and things like that. And that's really cool too, because everyone is like super intelligent and super driven, and just to be able to interact with these people and like to see the potential in the future. So yeah, that's the most fulfilling part of my job. And I don't know, most challenging. I don't know. I'm not going to answer that one because there's a few that I mean, I think the biggest thing is perspective, right? Like keeping the perspective of what you can control and what you can't, and maybe making the change that you can versus worrying about the change that you can't. And that's more philosophical than like directly job related, but it's important, right? Because you could get burnt out, spinning your wheels on things that you can't change. And so sometimes the biggest challenge is kind of zeroing in on your sphere of influence and making sure that the things that you can make better, you're doing that. So
I will echo John. I think people is what really makes it so rewarding for me. When we work with customers during flood events and they tell us stories like, we closed down all these roads because of the technology and it told us to, and we were able to save lives in doing that. Like it's so incredible to me to hear those stories from people. And then also, doing events like this, I have worked with the National Water Center and Quasi for the last couple of years, working with grad students and doing research. And I just love that ability to get the opportunity to work with students again. That's something that I've missed a lot in the industry. And so getting the opportunity to mentor, to talk to people about my career and about what they want to do with their career, like that is so rewarding, and seeing all of the cool things that people end up doing. I love that. In terms of challenges, there's a lot of challenges. I work in a very emerging type of technology, and so it takes a lot of education with people. Something that maybe, ecological engineers, Claudia, that you can relate to. Like you have to first tell them about why you're doing what you're doing and why it's important, because people didn't even know that it existed before. And so that can be frustrating at times, but again, it's about perspective, right? Like I came into this knowing that that was going to be a challenge, and now I find it really rewarding to see more and more people understanding why operational flood intelligence is so important and how it can change outcomes in our day-to-day lives. And so, there's always going to be challenges, but like John said, it's about your perspective and understanding what you can change, what you can influence, and then just trying not to be too upset about the rest of it. So.
And then Sharon had a question. Do you ever get to do field work in the industry, and are there any jobs within ecological engineering that maximizes field work opportunities? So maybe this is geared at Claudia.
Well, yes, I do get to do field work and I love that. And I think if you were going after a similar kind of role, targeting a civil engineering firm that has an ecological position opening, I think is a great route to do that. I will say that I lean a lot more on the hydraulics engineering side. So the coolest plants we usually save for our nerd biologists, and they get to go out there and they've spent so much of their life committed to plants. And I'm a lot more like water focused. So um, when there's a finite amount of field work, the coolest stuff might go to the biologists who have really put in the work on getting to see the funnest stuff. But I'm okay with that. I'm all right. I like culverts. I like I like working with the gray infrastructure too. But yeah, I do get to do field work pretty frequently, and that's really enjoyable and diversifies like my workday a lot.
And then I had another question. So I'll say, with uncertainty in the job market, but maybe things are less uncertain than I, originally thought they were going to be at the beginning of the year. What would kind of be a quick piece of advice each of you would have for someone on the job market that they would need to consider?
My answer is not actually like helpful guidance, like who to apply to or something. But um it was really hard for me leaving grad school and going back and working for a private engineering firm because I had worked with them. They were great. The people I worked with were great. And that's why I inevitably went back to work for them because I knew I was going to work with a great team, but I didn't see myself doing that work the rest of my life. And I was like, shoot, I have to, what am I doing back falling into that if that's not what I want to do with the rest of my career? And I think that the key, and now I'm doing the job I've always wanted. So I think that for just to reframe and be like, whatever job you fall into when you're 22 or 24, like, doesn't have to be it. Um, I'm very black and white, and it took a lot for me to realize that you can change your job pretty easily and pretty quickly and pivot pretty easily, especially when you're in your 20s. Like, everyone knows that you're trying to figure it out just like the rest of them. So even if you get a job that you're not in love with, try it out, get the best stuff you can out of it and the best experience you can, and you can always pivot.
I feel like I have two things that I think would be really good to consider in the uncertainty of this job market. Number one is it's much easier to find a job in your industry when you already have one. So getting your foot in and trying to find something, like talking about what Rachelle just mentioned with even if you're not in love with it, even if it's not your dream job, like it's much easier once you're actually within the industry to then move between companies or between opportunities. The second is you might want to consider the funding and stability of your position. Infrastructure is a really resilient industry when it comes to recessions. The contracts are long term. All infrastructure has a lifespan, and during a recession, historically, the government has used civil works to kickstart the economy. But we are in really unprecedented times. And so when I took the job at my company, they had been around for 74 years, and they had told me they didn't lay off a single person during the 2008 recession. And that meant a lot to me. There's dozens of people at my company with decades of experience at only that company, or they had left and come back. And that spoke a lot to the company culture for me. But I don't necessarily think that the first job that you get has to be the one you stick with. I'm a little bit of an abnormal person for that reason, but I think considering the stability of your position and the funding of it, and it's easier to have mobility once you're already in the job industry.
I will say that I recently was on the job market. I quit my previous job in December of last year and took 4 months off. So I know what a lot of you are going through. If you're starting to enter the job market, it's tough out there. I will say the current job I have now was a job that was created for me because of networking. I knew the team that I currently work with, and they heard that I was not working and I was on the job market, and they were like, "We want you to come work with us." And I was like, "Well, I'm taking time off, so like, contact me in a month." But they ended up creating a role for me. And so that is like the best case scenario. But if that's not you, one thing that I did find, and I did apply for other jobs at this time because I wasn't sure that I wanted to keep doing the same thing that I had been doing. I applied for other jobs, and a trick that I heard on a careers podcast that I found really, really worked was you submit your job application, always submit a cover letter, even if it doesn't request it, put in your resume, but then figure out who the hiring manager is, email them and say, "Hi, I've just applied for so-and-so job. I'm so excited. I would love to connect with you if you have time." And I actually connected with 3 different hiring managers ahead of an actual interview because I had reached out to them personally. And so when there are like 500 people applying to a job, it just makes you stand out a little bit more against the masses. And a lot of people, and as a hiring manager myself, like this happens, we use this AI software now that filters out all of these people. And so if for some reason you are not in the geographical location or you don't fulfill certain requirements, you automatically get filtered, even if you're willing to move or willing to do all these things. And so just finding ways to make yourself stand out and connect with the people that are hiring in the roles that you want, I think it can be so, so valuable. So would definitely recommend doing that because it worked really well for me in getting to connect with people that I did not already know. And also, if you are just not sure what you want to do, reach out to people in jobs that you think are interesting on LinkedIn and just say like, hey, I'd like to have a 20-30 minute just informational coffee chat over, Teams or something, and try and understand what you do. And people, some won't respond, but a lot of them will. People are a lot nicer than you think, and they're open to that kind of thing. So I would recommend that you do that if you can.
The only thing I would add, other than I wholeheartedly agree with everything that's been said, the only thing I would add is it only takes one. So whenever I was applying back before I got my position at South Dakota State, I was so frustrated because I would put all this effort into applications, not hear anything back. But the position I got at South Dakota State, it aligned really well with my background and experience, and that was the one that it took. And then I guess the other thing, which is a little bit antithetical to what Rachelle and Claudia mentioned, but when I was there, like don't life's too short to stay in an unhappy relationship. That includes with your job. But if it's like not ideal, maybe are there things that you could change about the position that make it ideal? Like have that conversation with your supervisor. And in South Dakota, like the worst thing about it for us is it was 15 hours to where I grew up and my parents. But other than that, like we leaned in. And so that we weren't looking, I didn't have the mental energy of trying to leave, and it was really beneficial. But having said that, like don't stay in a position where you're unhappy. But if you can, like lean in and give it your all.
I agree with that, John. Like, I feel like a lot of people don't realize that companies are looking for a fit of person. So if they're investing in you, they would like you to stick around for the long haul if they're a good people-centered company. And if you lean in and communicate, which I did and I have done multiple times throughout my career, that has been pivotal for keeping me fulfilled and satisfied with what I'm doing and the trajectory.
All right, thank you all. We've come to the end of our hour, but I really appreciate the panelists for giving their time today, and thank you all in attendance. There's some links in the chat for a survey, but you can also scan the QR code here. But just a final PSA is next Thursday, November 20th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Alexander Babinski, who was the undergraduate poster winner at the AES conference this past year, will be presenting a student lightning talk on undergrad experiences in ecological engineering. So please check that out if you're interested. But thank you all again for your time, and please reach out if you have any questions or concerns.